Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Arsaholics podcast. It's Sunday night. It's me, Raj, and you've got Aaron in here. All right, mate? Hello, Aaron.
Hello, mate. How are you? Good Sunday.
Very good Sunday. Very good Sunday. You just got the two of us tonight, guys. Mize is unwell, and Nero is right at the moment. He sent us a video from London King's Cross. He went to Elland Road. He was one of the Arsaholics who was actually at the game. So he's had a really fun, boozy night. He stayed last night, didn't he, Aaron?
Yeah, I think he went up last night. I think he's on his way. He must be back now, right? If he's at King's Cross, so probably still drinking, celebrating the win, and he deserves it. Made the trip up, commitment, and fair play to him.
Exactly. It's a fun place to go up to. I've been drinking in Leeds before. It can be a bit shady though, so I hope that he didn't.
No, okay, sorry. It's quite funny you say that.
Yeah.
So my stag do was in Leeds, and it was actually this weekend 1 year ago.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's cool.
So if I'd waited a year to get married, I could have thrown in an away day as well.
Hindsight. A wonderful thing. But you know what? At least when you're on your stag, you got to focus on just getting absolutely wasted and not having to do anything. Yeah, exactly. Surviving. That's a good word to use to go into this review, isn't it? Because you see, this is going to be a bit more of a traditional interview type thing, because me, like most other folks in the UK, this is where like the UK is just so unbelievably bizarre. Me, like most other folks in the UK, did not watch this game because it wasn't effing live, because we don't get all the live games in the UK, which again, if I didn't mention it 10 seconds ago, is just mental and bizarre. And most of you, therefore, who aren't listening from the UK probably did get to watch the game live. But again, let me reiterate, I did not. Aaron did found a mystical way. He found a completely legal way of doing it. So well done, Aaron. So he's going to be really giving me and us a lot more of detail with regards to how he actually thought the performance was. I did, however, I mean, you can say what you want. I would have to believe you, right? So I'm not going to debate anything you say. I did see the bite-size highlights that they've the bite-sized highlights that Arsenal issued. So listen, mate, like taking a step back, I mean, look, it's a win, right? We bloody won again. And given all the other results that have happened today, we're actually 4 points clear.
We are.
Liverpool beating Man City. Let's just go from there. Like, how do you feel right now, Aaron?
Oh, okay, look. At the start of the season, if anyone had shown you, we're 10 games in now, the Premier League table after 10 games, nobody, if you had said Arsenal would be 4 points clear above Man City at the top of the Premier League, nobody would have believed you. Like, look, we're all relatively optimistic Arsenal fans. We're all very much never really doubted the project or the journey we're on, but none of us would have predicted this. So we just need to roll with it. I think we just got to go with it and see where we end up in this wild season. But look, it's great, right? Today was a game where we played Leeds, a very good team who haven't lost at home all season, after getting back from bloody Norway on Thursday, on an artificial pitch. We probably got back Friday morning, I assume. Maybe trained one day, left Saturday afternoon. So we had one training session, and this was never going to be easy. I know I did predict we'd win 4-0, but that didn't happen. And we pulled it off. Like, a lot of drama, a lot of incidents, but at the end of the day, it's the result that counts, and we got it done.
It's the results that counts, like you said. We said this last episode, right? We said that it doesn't matter if it's 6-0, it doesn't matter if it's 1-0, you get 3 points at the end of the day, right? So scoreline aside, it was 1-0. Talking about how the actual game went, I mean, firstly, look, just before I say that, just thank you to all the guys who are just like giving comments already. I'm going to go to one of those comments right now and ask you, Aaron, if you agree with this. Chana said tough and plucky win, but we'll take it all day long. We, with regards to predictions, he said 4-0. I actually said it was going to be a draw. So, well done to you for predicting the win. But was it more like a game that you might have ended up it may have normally ended up as a draw, as Chan says, tough and plucky.
Not even that. I think we probably deserve to lose. Let's be realistic. Like that second half, we did nothing. And there was a first half performance where we had our moments, but we didn't really create anything of note. Like, a couple of half chances here and there, but the second half was probably the worst we've played all season. Now we can analyze why and how much of that was Leeds playing well, how much of that was us playing badly, our system, the tactics. But Leeds, I haven't seen the expected goals for this game, but I'd be very
Arsenal
surprised.
Less than Leeds. It's the first time Arsenal have had a smaller XG than their opponent this season.
Yeah, exactly. So, look, we got away with it, but let's be realistic. These last two games, we haven't played well. We didn't play too good against Bodo. We definitely didn't play very well against Leeds, but we've come away with 6 points. The old Arsenal doesn't do that. This Arsenal team last season doesn't do that. So we're learning from our mistakes. We're learning how to this project, this team haven't gone through the away at Europe, away in the league combination before. And this is a new thing that we're still trying to figure out how to manage. And we're going to eventually figure it out. But big teams have to do that. Big teams go away in Europe and then go away in the league to a team like Leeds and figure it out. And sometimes they play well, sometimes they don't. But what they do is they win.
It's true. Excuse me. Let's just expand on that point a little bit, because I think it is an important one. We went away on Thursday night, pretty far away. Probably came back and we didn't have much to prepare, much time at all. Do you think, being a bit skeptical, do you think that's why he went with the team that he did? He basically went with the same team that played against Liverpool, and Tomiyasu at left back was a tactical surprise on that day. He went for it again this game. Do you think, being a bit skeptical, do you think he just thought, I don't have that much time to prepare for this game, I'm just going to prepare the team to just do what we did against Liverpool? And
to a certain extent, yeah. I reckon some of it was probably because Tierney played on Thursday, and you probably don't want to play or either Tierney or Tomiyasu twice in the space of 4 days and 2 away games. I think that was so. And I assume Zinchenko is still injured. I guess I don't think he was on the bench today. So I think he kind of has to. I mean, Tierney did come on, and I thought Tomiyasu was good. And it's going to be interesting going forward to see, when we have Zinchenko fit, when we have Tierney fit, and we have Tomiyasu fit, and they're all well rested, who he actually goes for. But I think there's an element of that. I think if there wasn't a midweek game, Tierney maybe would have played today. But the fact that you kind of want to take every little chance to freshen it up when you can, given we've got another game coming up in midweek. So yeah, I think rotation is going to be key. But I think everyone else kind of picks themselves, right?
It's interesting with those three choices, right? You've basically, it's almost like Football Manager. You can put them into buckets. You've got the defensive left back, you've got the marauding wing back, you've got the inverted full back. You've just literally whatever tack you play, you drop them. It's a really interesting point, but it's also quite interesting that's almost our only sphere of change that happens ever at the moment, right? We've got this very set team that barring injuries we play, and we've got the variation that you get in the side is basically this left back change, isn't it?
Yeah, and I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I think the good thing is it allows this team to really figure out and trust each other and figure out how everyone plays and just get to know each other. The bad thing is, if there is an injury, if there is a suspension in one or two of these key positions, and we've discussed this before, right? There are a couple of positions where we are a bit thin on the ground, but actually our summer business and our summer activity has just allowed us to have a little bit more rotation. And we've got players now who we've got one player who can potentially play, players who can play in multiple positions, basically, right? So Tomiyasu can play in multiple positions. None of us would have thought Tomiyasu would have been our starting left back when we were discussing this in the summer, right? Against Liverpool and against and today. None of us would have said Ben White would be having a run at right back. But all of these players are in the squad because they can play multiple positions. So going forward, and I'm sure we'll talk about PSV later on, and as games become more important and we have less rest, having players who can come in and do a job in a number of positions, so they play one position one week and another position another week, is actually really, really valuable.
Yeah, completely agree. Going to the game itself, Aaron. And so at the beginning, you talked about the second half that wasn't so great. Let's talk about the first half for a bit. Again, having not seen the game, I did see the goal, and the first goal was like a tremendous finish from Saka. And Stevie here in the comments saying, on the bright side, remember people asking questions about Saka after 4/5 games of decent performances without the numbers. Do me a favor. I mean, he's right. Like, actually, Saka's numbers look okay now. They look decent. They still probably don't illustrate the value he's adding probably every game at the moment. He's really stepping up. And did you see that in his goal today?
Yeah, I think just generally, I've been really impressed with Saka. I know I think Martinelli's probably stolen the limelight because of the numbers. But
is it the numbers, mate, or is it his style? Martinelli's one of those like just incredible quick feet, pace, bums. Gets you standing up. Like, do you know what I mean? Is it that makes him stand out?
Maybe. I think he gets the goals, right? And especially at the start of the season, especially at home, Martinelli got the goals. I think Saka is, for me, just a phenomenal player. And, some of the things he does on the pitch, the way he runs at players, the way he takes them on, the way he backs into them and comes out of these duels on top every single time is phenomenal. And I still think people don't realize how good Saka is. I think he's our best player still. I think he's better than Jesus. I think he's better than Martinelli as a player. But he's quite, I don't want to say underappreciated, but I think he probably is a bit underrated in terms of just raw technical ability and aggression and power. I love the kid, obviously. I'm sure you do too.
Of course. And it's interesting, mate, because he is he does keep showing signs for me that he's improving week by week, and he's still so young. It was only last game that I think I was talking to you guys and in our WhatsApp group, and I was saying that I was sort of criticizing his right foot, and I was saying whenever the ball gets onto his right foot, he seems to just go for power, and if he learns to kind of control it a bit more or just trust his placement a bit more, it's he can be a top player. Because I still feel that he's very left-footed. I mean, you made me eat my words, because this goal was literally him smashing it with his right foot, like absolutely, like probably the only way it goes in from where he took the shot is if you nail it high, and that's what he did, didn't he? It was a brilliant finish.
Yeah, I think the other thing was all this came after, in my opinion, a hilarious back pass by Rodrigo, who. I don't know if you saw it on when you watched the highlights, but he's basically in
like a backward cross field.
Yeah, if that was De Bruyne passing that Saka, everyone would have been like that. What a guy! But this guy, for no reason whatsoever, I still don't know why he did this. He has no pressure. He's on the right flank. He turns around and says, oh, "I'm just going to switch this crossfield backwards," and he's obviously aiming for. I'm not sure who he's aiming for, but the Leeds player. Saka just gets the ball, and then I think, would this be really funny if I think Odegaard gets the ball, maybe plays it Saka or something like that.
I think Saka gets it first, and then he passes it to Odegaard as a 1-2.
Okay, yeah. And then I'm thinking this would be really funny if we score from here. But then he gets quite deep, and I think, oh, he's probably not. And then all of a sudden, he just smashes it and beats the keeper for power and placement.
Is phenomenal. And how were we the rest of that first half, mate? Because just at the time during the first half, I didn't even see any highlights live, so I was there following it, not even on Twitter. I think I just seen the messages come through in our group saying Saka had scored, and then when I looked at the kind of on live score or whatever that app is, it seemed to suggest that it was a relatively even half. It seemed like we had a lot more of the possession, but the chances were kind of equal. Was that the story of the first half, or was there a bit more to it?
Yeah, I think there was a chance that Jesus had maybe 5 or 10 minutes afterwards where he kind of scuffs it and probably should have done a bit better. But apart from that, it was a pretty end-to-end game. it was Leeds attacking, then us attacking, and it was a very open game. And at that point, there was a couple of moves where we looked like Xhaka and Odegaard were playing some nice combination play. We were getting the ball out wide, especially, and using the flanks to create chances and get use the ball meaningfully. So yeah, I would say that if you looked at the first half in isolation, you might say actually we might have just edged it. Although the one thing we didn't talk about was the 40-minute delay.
Oh gosh, yeah.
During after the first minute when there was a power cut, right? So obviously they didn't show this in the highlights, but we kicked off, and after about 2 minutes, the ref's like, something's gone wrong. It turns out the VAR was down, and they sent the players off, and then we come back 40 minutes later, which I thought was pretty funny. And thank God the VAR came back.
Yeah,
right?
I was going to say it was actually needed, wasn't it? Jeez.
Yeah. So I mean, we had that to contend as well. Yeah.
What did you from watching? Because what I thought was, on the face of it, I thought that was going to work in Arsenal's favour massively, because you sort of feel like, to settle the home crowd down, just like stop playing football for like half an hour or whatever, and then it wasn't hard as a crowd to just get really geared back up. Did you notice any of that?
It was, I'd love to have had Nero on, because I wonder what it sounded like in the ground, but I thought it was. I mean, the crowd were never. It was never super loud, but especially in the first half, it was a pretty even game, I thought. And I think when we scored, because we scored relatively early on, there was probably this feeling of, okay, could we go and get a second and actually kill this game off pretty early? But actually, Leeds did really well to come back into the game and create the chances they did.
What is it that they did well, or that we didn't do so well? Because we've been pretty good at controlling games, generally speaking. So what was it? Was it? Were they pressing well? Were we pressing poorly? What was it?
It was the Leeds press in the second half was incredible. And for whatever reason, we really struggled to be able to beat their press in the second half. And on top of that, when they had the ball, our pressing was really weak. And I don't know if that was tired legs, because to be able to press like we do, we're quite a big running team now, right? Where everyone knows where they have to be. They're in their zones, and they know when they have to press and when we don't have to press, and who we stand off and who we get tight to. But that all seemed to have gone out the window in the second half. I thought we used the flanks pretty well in the first half, but for whatever reason, I think we just became a lot more compressed and narrow in the second half as well. And that just meant that Leeds in the middle third could just squeeze us, and then they'd win the ball, and they'd play a really good through ball in, and they'd be in behind our goal or running at our defense. And we just didn't have the answers to stop them. And,
you can sort of talk about fatigue a little bit, I suppose, from Thursday, but then, a lot of those players didn't start. So in some ways, you'd hope you'd be able to deal with the energy requirements. But at the same time, it is a tough place to go this season, isn't it, at Leeds? Because Leeds, if I'm right, I think I'm right in saying this is the first time they've lost at home this season. So it's not meant to be an easy place to go to. And but with the second half, it seemed like there were a lot of very, very key incidents here. So just to touch on those key incidents, I think the first is a disallowed goal. I've seen a disallowed goal from Patrick Bamford. I've seen it. It didn't look incredibly contentious to me. It seemed like it was perhaps like a not. I wouldn't say these days. I think if when people say soft, when people say like it was a soft foul, there seems to be a connotation that it wasn't really a foul. But I think when I looked at it, it seemed like, okay, yeah, fine, the ref's blown, and that's nothing really too contentious about that. What did you think?
I don't know, man. I felt like if that was against us, and if that was, I don't know, Jesus against their centre back, I would have probably felt hardly done by. I think it's the type of goal that if the ref doesn't give it, I don't think VAR rules that one out. And this is the thing with consistency of, I think the message from the refereeing body has always been they're going to try and let things go and try and, those soft 50-50s, they'll give the advantage to the attacker or the player who kind of is on the ball. And I thought that, and I thought, oh, actually, that's I'd say that's not a foul, but it's one of those, like, you can give it, and if the ref has given it, the VAR is never going to rule that one out. So I don't think it was massively controversial, but if that had finished 0-0 and we'd done that, I'd have been really, really annoyed.
And then not that long after that, it's a penalty to Leeds, isn't it? And
Yeah.
It I saw that doesn't look like it's debatable at all. That it looked to me that's a very clear penalty. Saliba's handballed it. Probably, it's not like I don't think it's like a deliberate handball, but it's still a handball. Like it's still by the rules, it's still a handball. And then Bamford steps up to take the penalty. It's a pretty poor penalty, isn't it?
Yeah. I think, as with anything, when someone doesn't score a penalty, you have to kind of ask, like, what was it? Was it the striker taking a really bad penalty? Was it the goalkeeper? Was it the team? Like, all of these, the team could have put him off. The pressure, there was some, probably didn't see it in the highlights, but we seemed to try and like just delay the penalty by maybe an extra 30 or 40 seconds. And maybe that got into his head. Maybe Ramsdale coming up to him and, maybe words were said that might have gone into his head. Or he could just be really bad at penalties. I don't know.
But what I wondered is watching it is that because Ramsdale goes the right way, and I wondered whether, as he's literally in that split second as he's about to take it, he's seen Ramsdale going the right direction, and then almost semi sort of bottles it and kind of goes, "Oh, I need to go as wide as possible." Do you know what I mean? Kind of goes that it makes that extra effort to get in the corner, and maybe that's what.
That's
what did it.
It did look like he I don't say scuffed it, but you're right. I think it did look like he almost changed his mind a little bit with that penalty in terms of placement. And I think you're probably right. Maybe he was going to go maybe further, like slightly towards the middle of the goal, and then he just saw Ramsdale edging that way, and it's like, I'm going to have to get a bit more of an angle on this, and then just messed it up. But no, thank God for that, because I think if they had scored then, they were, their tails were up at that point. They probably would have gone on and won it. But actually, I thought Ramsdale was actually very, very good today. And generally, if it wasn't for him and I'd say Gabriel, we probably would have lost that game. I thought generally those two were really, really good.
It's interesting. So, okay, I'm going to talk to you about this. What you've just said. You talked about Gabriel and Ramsdale being very good today. I want to talk about the Ramsdale point first, because there's been two comments. One relates to Ramsdale, one relates to Gabriel. So I'm going to go with the Ramsdale one for now. So this is my saying, can we talk about how good Aaron Ramsdale was today? Baffling how he's not getting a look in for the England #1 spot. Brackets C Pickford's clanger yesterday. Now, it was interesting. I'll let you kind of give your response to this, Aaron. What I found interesting about this is I think this is something that a lot of Arsenal fans have talked about. Not just Arsenal fans. I think many fans have talked about who should be England #1. People have talked about how Pickford has done for England in an England shirt. But still, kind of on form over the last season and 10 games. I think, there is a debate as to who should be England's #1. The interesting thing is, I don't know if you heard this yesterday, or not yesterday, but I think over the last week, Aaron Ramsdale said that he thinks that it's a year too early for him to be England #1, something like that. He basically
Aaron Ramsdale said that.
Aaron Ramsdale said, where's the effect of, Aaron Ramsdale has a lot of respect for Jordan Pickford. He said, I remember this a couple of years ago as well, I think when he had just joined Arsenal, and someone had said something about comparing him as to whether he was better than Jordan Pickford. And he said almost categorically, he goes, it's just amazing that I'm getting that kind of comparison. What Jordan's done is, like, for England and the Premier League, is amazing. He clearly really rates Jordan Pickford as a goalkeeper. And I'm pretty certain, I quote him from the last week, where he said words to the effect of, I think pretty much, verbatim, he said that the England #1 spot is probably a year too early for him. So I'll pause there. Just on the England point, do you think that, regardless of what Aaron Ramsdale believes, do you think that he should be England #1 and connected to any kind of performance that he had today?
Yeah, I think he's as good as everyone else, put it that way. I know Pickford has done well in an England shirt, but when he's in goal in the Premier League, I know. I mean, he's obviously under more spotlight, but I think he makes a lot of mistakes. You look at Pope. Pope made mistakes when he played for England the other week, and Ramsdale never seems to get a look in, and never seems to get a consistent run of games. And you'd have to ask why, right? And we could probably do a whole pod on, maybe we should, on Southgate's team selections and tactical selections for England. But I think if you pick players on form, Arsenal are currently the form team of the Premier League, and their form goalkeeper is English. So surely you'd pick him for the World Cup over an Everton goalkeeper or a Newcastle goalkeeper, to a certain extent. But I think I don't know. I think Ramsdale really adds value when you look at like playing up from the back and building up possession and positional play. That's not really Southgate's game. That's not really what Southgate wants to do. And I think maybe he just thinks, I want someone who is dominant in the box, good at crosses, and maybe better shot stopper. And I don't even think Ramsdale's a bad shot stopper compared to Pickford. Maybe that's what he thinks, or he just likes that familiarity. But no, either way, I think if you're picking on form and you're picking on quality and certainly potential, I think it has to be Ramsdale.
It's interesting because I think Southgate has sort of developed a reputation for someone who is willing to pick players who don't play in the top six, and therefore is willing to pick players by inverted commas form. But at the same time, he's also shown himself to be a manager who has favourites and has people that he likes, who he feels haven't let him down. Harry Maguire, case in point. Yeah. And I think Pickford is the other big example. So I wonder if that is what is standing in front of Ramsdale's way. Because today, in terms of the game today, from what I saw, he looked brilliant. I think he got man of the match.
He was brilliant.
Was he brilliant? Yeah. Tell me a little bit about that. I mean, was it his best game of the season, would you say?
Probably. I think generally of the last 3 or 4 games, I know we've conceded in the last 3 or 4, but he's come up with some big saves. I remember the Richarlison one in the derby, for example, when Son put him through. There was another one against Nunes, I think, last week, potentially, or I might be making that up, or maybe Jota. And then today, when we were, none of these saves, you watch the highlights, none of them were world class. He didn't do anything spectacular where he saved something he shouldn't save, but he generally put himself, he was in the right place at the right time. There was one moment where I think Saliba played a bit of a dodgy back pass to him, and he came out, kind of dealt with it, but then Leeds won possession back or something like that. My memory's a bit foggy. And basically he stayed out and stayed off his line and then was able to deal with that, right? I think another keeper, once they've dealt with the danger, probably retreats back to their line. And if he does retreat back to his line, Leeds have the ball unopposed in a very, very dangerous area of the box. And I think he made a lot of 50-50 calls today, and he got every single 50-50 call right. And I think, when we had, Leeds towards the end started throwing crosses and long balls into the box, and he won everything. And he was consistently good. And actually, I thought some of our defenders probably didn't have their best games today. So I thought Saliba didn't have a great game. I thought Ben White didn't have a great game today. And in those, in this situation, you really want your goalkeeper to bail you out, right? He is the last defender in that sense. And when your defenders don't have a good game, the top teams still win because their goalkeepers have a good game. And we haven't really needed our goalkeeper to have a good game over these last few weeks because we've been scoring 2-3 goals every game. But today was one where I thought he did really well.
Fair. Now, to the second point, Gabriel. So it's interesting because Stevie here is quite contrasting to what you said here. So Stevie here in the comments is saying, Gabriel is concerning me now. He's in trouble way too often for my liking. It was raised the eyebrow before. Now it's, does he need dropping for a game or two? But you think he was probably our one of our better players today?
Yeah, honestly, I thought Gabriel was really good. I think out of the two, Saliba probably had a slightly worse game. There's a couple of moments where he, there's a I think it was a bad back pass, and he got caught on the ball once. And there's obviously the handball. There's the incident at the end, and we can talk about how much Gabriel had to do in that game. But I thought he was magnificent. I thought he really held the line. He was probably the best defender in that back four today. Tomiyasu was also pretty good. I think I disagree with Stevie, unfortunately, but that's why
Gabriel has
debate.
Absolutely. Yeah. Gabriel's provided really interesting debate, I think, this season for Arsenal, and it's quite I'm going to say, like, it's quite minute debate, because it's things that, when you're winning the way that we're top of the bloody league.
Yeah,
you're obviously picking some things, because otherwise, it's boring. You want to talk about something, and Gabriel, I think, has been one of those very small topics that I think fans are sort of saying, okay, is he? If there was one link that looks a bit weak, is it Gabriel? Are there moments where he is perhaps letting us down? I think if we go to the last game, there was the first goal for Liverpool, that there was a debate as to whether he's getting caught out and he's overstretching, and etc. And so that sort of stuff. And then I don't know, therefore, whether as a result of that, he's someone where when you watch games, you look at more, and everything that he doesn't do that's quite perfect. Some fans are sort of getting on his back. I'm not saying that Stevie's getting on his back per se, but I suppose the challenge Arsenal have right now is, regardless, that's to say, even if it was Saliba that we're having some question marks over or whatever, in the same way, it's tough, isn't it? Because he's now Arteta's established a system where he really likes Ben White at right back. He really, really likes him there. So I can't imagine a scenario where he was to drop almost Gabriel or Saliba right now to put Ben White back at centre back, and then bring in Tomiyasu at right back. I mean, I can imagine him playing Tomiyasu at right back if it's purely because he's preferred to Ben White, but not to put him there because he thinks that he needs to play Ben White to replace one of his centre backs. I don't see that. So I think Stevie's point here about, does he need dropping for a game or two? I think that would do too much. Firstly, I don't think he deserves to get dropped, but I think that even if he did, I think it would just cause a bit too much disruption.
Yeah. I mean, put it this way. I think it's not the days where we had a centre back injured and Mustafi was coming in or something like that, right? So if we were to make a change and Ben White was to come on into the middle, there are worse centre backs that come in, right? So we know Ben White can do a job, right? So we're in a bit of a luxury here where we have 2, 3, even 4, if you include Tierney and Tomiyasu, players who can play in the middle. And then we've got the Rob Holding option as well. So it's not that, but I just think this system, I think he really, really likes Saliba and Gabriel. And I don't think that was the plan. I think the plan at the start of the season was Gabriel and Ben White, but Saliba almost forced his hand and said, no, I'm going to play, and you're going to have to build a system around me. And we've landed on Gabriel, Ben White, and a left back, be that Tierney, Zinchenko, or even Tomiyasu. And towards the end of the game, he did take Ben White off, moved Tomiyasu to right back, and played Tierney at left back, because I think at that point Ben White was maybe struggling a bit. But I actually think this is the type of game where you want a Gabriel on the pitch, because they're throwing long balls in. They've got tricky players. Gabriel is the type of player who will thrive in that environment. I think maybe Saliba probably got, maybe felt the pressure a bit much because he hasn't really experienced a game like this before, which is a very different game to the Liverpool game where we're on top. The atmosphere is, the crowd are in our favour. The atmosphere is towards us. This is a very different game. This is the type of game you probably don't get in France, right? In the sense that you have an away crowd that is very hostile, and you're a big team going there where they're all gunning for blood. That's not the type of game. Today was a very Premier League type of game.
And Leeds have a famous atmosphere in that way, right? A lot of players and managers say that Leeds is probably the most vicious atmosphere. I think Fergie wrote about it in his book, didn't he? And he basically said that there's just no place in the world like it. He goes, like, the type of like, he used worse words, but effectively the vicious passion, type of thing that you get from the fans, this type of stuff that you get shouted at you, and the heat. It is intense. And I wonder if any of that intensity affected the officials right at the end of the game, because that instant right at the end of the game, right, where it kind of seemed like it could have all come unstuck for Arsenal when the referee has consulted his linesman right at the very end and given Leeds a penalty and issued Gabriel a red card, which subsequently was overturned by VAR. I mean, Sean in the comments talking about, Patrick Bamford, who was kind of writhing around on the floor, claiming to have got kicked by Gabriel. Chan says, my thoughts and prayers are with Bamford's family and friends. It was awful seeing him go down like he got shot towards the end of the game. He did look like that, right? He just classic like player making a meal out of something, and he didn't get touched. And it was an interesting one though. There wasn't, Aaron, because when you see the replays, it looks like Bamford fouls Gabriel first. That to me is clear. But as Gabriel is falling on the floor, he does try and extend his leg in a very reactionary, annoyed way. Is that a bit naive by Gabriel?
Yeah, I think it probably is. What I think he does is I think he thinks about kicking out and then probably changes his mind mid-fall, but his legs are already in a bit of an awkward position. And it just looked, and then Bamford has to make a meal of it. I reckon he thought on the way down, I'm going to kick this guy, but then changed his mind, and therefore it looks a bit clumsier than it actually does, because he could, and then therefore Bamford has to exaggerate the contact and looks even more silly. But honestly, I thought it's one of those where when you're watching it live, you're just like, okay, it's a foul. Then you see it, and then the ref blows his whistle, and it's like, oh my God, he's going to give this. And you're like, oh, he hasn't seen the foul, and therefore, or like he just thought the first one isn't a foul, and he's decided to give the second one. And then when he gives a red, you're like, well, that means he has to give a penalty, and he gives a penalty. And it was like 93rd minute, and you're like, swearing, you're cursing everything. And I thought, oh my word, what have we done here? And thank God for VAR, right? And it's for all those people who say football and Premier League would be better without VAR, just imagine if that had been given today. No one would have been able to overturn that, right? And we'd be walking out of Elland Road with a drop 2 points, and would have been fuming for weeks about it. So I know VAR has its issues and they need to fix some things, but I'm a big fan of just having a second chance to get big decisions right, because so often refs get the big decisions wrong, and I don't trust them to live on their own and just sort things out by themselves. So look, should Gabriel do better? Yeah, he should just go down, and he should have not made a meal of it, and then none of this would have happened. And yeah, I think maybe that's naivety. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I think you're probably right in that. I think he goes, while he's going down, he always thinks about kicking him, and then he tries to stop. I think it is one of those things that in the heat of the moment, it's really hard, I think, to stop yourself from doing something that reactionary like that. You're probably in that heat of the battle, that moment, he's probably just really annoyed that someone has almost deliberately shoved him over. And there's just like a reaction, like, you would almost, if you were in the street and if someone was to push you over, it's like that kind of just innate reaction kind of thing. And that was it. So I think it ultimately, unfortunately, it could have been something that ended up costing us, but I would have felt really sorry for him. Like, I think that like 19 out of 20 players do exactly the same thing. It's just a reactionary thing.
Kick out? Or make it look like they're kicking out?
Well, in the way that he did, where, like you say, he didn't actually properly kick out. Like, there was something, like he clearly, if he wanted to kick him properly, he could have kicked him properly. He didn't, right? He purposely did not. So I'm sort of with you there. And then look, and I totally agree about this being an advert for why VAR overall is still really needed. Like, it gets more right than it gets wrong. And I think that ultimately the stuff that we really debate over and the stuff that we get really upset over is one, like, just the fact that it takes so much time sometimes, and it really kind of can stop you being able to celebrate and all that kind of stuff. So that's not ideal. But also it's the ones which are just so debatable that, only when it's slowed down to the nth degree does it look like there's any kind of issue. And I think those ones are really annoying. But overall, I think
Yeah,
today
I mean,
was.
there are I remember at the start of the season, there were some where I was just like, how have two people looked at this and decided it's not a foul? But they are so rare.
Yeah.
But usually, as with anything, it's subjective, and these decisions are subjective, and we need to just accept that those subjective calls, they're not going to overturn, and that's okay. But thankfully, this wasn't a subjective one. I think the ref got that massively wrong.
And is Bamford, is he benefiting from, be provocative? Is he benefiting from being an English striker? Like in that incident, is it it's the same that would have happened for Harry Kane, where England centre forward, like kind of, I don't know, shining kind of knight, if you like, in some ways.
Yeah.
And if he looks like they've been hurt, then they've been hurt. If it looks like they've been fouled, then they've been fouled.
Yeah. Well, he only came on. I think he came on at half time, right? And then he was involved for the handball, I think, where Saliba, was it him? Yeah, I think it was him. No, sorry, he was involved when the goal was disallowed, and he fouled Gabriel actually for when the goal was disallowed when he scored, and then he was involved with Gabriel again at full time for this incident. So maybe they've just been at each other all game, and actually maybe Gabriel's just wound him up, and they've wound each other up, and when you're under the caution in the 93rd minute, players lose their heads. But Gabriel is the type to lose his head, right? We've seen that before. He's not a player who can control himself under pressure. It reminds me a bit like Koscielny. Koscielny was brilliant, but then always just had a stupid moment in him. Gabriel's a bit like that, but overall, I think he was probably our second or third best player.
Yeah, I mean, on that basis, it would have been completely heartbreaking for him if at the end of the game, you get sent off and the game it changes on something that which you didn't even really.
Yeah, because that would have been a 3-game ban probably if it was violent conduct.
Yeah, and I wonder if they would have probably appealed that afterwards, right? And it's a good chance of. But anyway, no, you're right. But listen, we finish, and we are top of the league, dude. Is this win different in terms of winning ugly? It's probably the first time that we've won, but not outright 100% deserved to win, if you know what I mean. I was
going to say exactly that.
Yeah. And does that taught you something about this team?
Yeah, I think it's taught me a few things, actually. I think one is that this team is a bit human in the sense that we're not always capable of playing to the level that we're playing at. And we've played at a very, very good level for the first 8 or 9 games this season, right? Especially against Spurs, especially against Liverpool. We've had to be very, very good. I think we've seen the limit of this team's attacking play, where there are situations where a team or our play can, either Leeds have stopped us, and they're the first team to have stopped us from playing well this season, or for whatever reason we had an off day with our attacking play where we just couldn't get it right. Like our forwards couldn't get in the game, the midfielders, Odegaard, Xhaka, Partey, all weren't at their best, especially in the second half. They got overrun. I'm sure there are better tactical people than you and I who can probably tell us exactly what happened in the second half, but we didn't look on it, right? So I've learned that actually there is a limit to this team, and that's a bit worrying because we know that actually that second half could happen again, especially away from home, and we've got quite a few away games coming. But on the positive side, we won, right? And we hung in there. We defended well. Our goalkeeper stepped up when we needed to. Our defenders did a job. We kept a clean sheet. And hopefully these types of performances can be minimized. But let's be realistic. This time last season, that is a 2-1 loss or a 3-1 loss. And instead, we're sitting here 4 points top of the league. So it's okay. I think it's okay.
I agree. And it's another away Premier League game coming up on the weekend. But before that, it is PSV. It's the rescheduled game. It's the game that was, meant to happen just before the Queen's passing. So it's a bit out of sync, and as a result, we don't have a Premier League fixture this midweek when other teams do.
That would have been Man City at home, right?
It would have been Man City at home, and again, like I don't. I think someone else said this on Twitter. I think it was LeGrove who basically said it wouldn't have been a good time to play Man City just after they had lost to Liverpool. I sort of agree with that. I feel like, I feel like with Man City, they're a team that you almost want to catch them cold. You want to catch them, after they've been on a little bit of a run and they suddenly are just getting a little bit complacent, not like a wounded animal. So maybe that is beneficial. But the thing is, this game against PSV, it is a really important game for us, actually, because the way that the Europa League groups are panning out is quite interesting in that the new format means, I think the slightly tweaked format means that second place has to play a playoff against the team that drops out from the Champions League. Now, last year, that perhaps wouldn't have been too much of an issue. This year, there's some decent teams that look like they're going to come down from the Champions League. So it feels like you really don't want to finish second in your Europa League group, right? You really don't want to finish second in your Europa League group because it could be, say, a Barcelona that you end up having to play in a 2-leg knockout before, and if you finish top, forget, playing someone hard. You don't have to play anyone at all. That's just 2 fixtures saved. And so at the moment, although we've got a really, really, 100% record in our group, although we have that, it's still not wrapped up for us. We're not still guaranteed of first place. So this game against PSV is going to be a good one because if we beat them, I want to say if we beat PSV, then we'll go to 12 points. PSV will be on 7 points. So no, they could still in theory catch us, but then I think we'd have to basically lose both our next games, right? Both our games after that. So it is big. PSV are a decent team. Do you see, therefore, any kind of variation to what we've been doing of late in Europa, i.e. playing a majority second string? That being said, I guess it hasn't been completely second string, but do you see us potentially going with an even stronger team on Thursday?
Possibly. I think what we've done is it seems like we have a core Europa League squad of first 11, right? So that's like Vieira and Nketiah, Holding, Turner, Marquinhos, Tierney, and then especially in the middle and maybe out wide sometimes we seem to just rotate those first team players in and out of the squad. So I think it was Saka that played last time, and then before that Xhaka was playing and Odegaard was playing. So I think we're being quite calculated in terms of how we give first team players minutes, but actually I think we might give a few more players some minutes is it on Thursday, the game? Because if you win this one, then you're right. Like this is the one, right? And PSV are no mugs. They've won most of their games. I think they dropped. I'm not sure who they dropped points to. Potentially Bodo, who are also a pretty decent team in their place, as we saw. So I think we just need to. We'll probably. I don't think Jesus is going to play. I think Eddie will play, for example. I think Turner will play. I don't think Ramsdale will play. But there's a couple of players. I think it'll be a very, very strong bench, as it has been. And actually, we will. Yeah, I mean, I'll be very interested. The team selection has surprised me now and then. Like I thought the Bodo team was stronger than I would have thought it would be. So actually, maybe we just play our strongest team, because actually what you can do then is if we win this one, hopefully the last game, the home leg against Zurich, is a bit of a dead rubber and we've won the group.
And then you can start resting more.
Yeah, then you can just play everyone. So you probably look at where and when the fixtures are, right? So we've just played Leeds. Yes, that was tough. Got Southampton away. We sometimes struggle against Southampton, but I have a feeling that the Zurich game is right before Chelsea away.
Okay.
And actually, would you rather rest players before Southampton away or Chelsea away? And I think you probably take the latter. So maybe we look at that in a calculated way. And I do think sometimes we obsess over rest and fitness and rotation. But, you look at the Man Cities, you look at Chelsea's, you look at Liverpool. Salah's playing 3 times a week, every week. He's playing in the Champions League. He's playing in the league. that's okay. These players, these are top athletes. They're conditioned to do so. They will get their rest when they need it. And I was I can't remember which podcast I was listening to where they talked a lot about actually for these elite athletes, they actually need to play. They need to be hitting that level of performance every 3-4 days, because their body needs to just stay like maxed out.
Interesting.
And what's really interesting was actually, if you're a first team player, you're far more likely, you do less work if the team is dominating. If you bring a Gabriel Jesus into a youth team, he probably has to run around more because he knows it. He has to carry the team, and if he doesn't do the job, the team will struggle. But if you play the first team, we can dominate possession. We run around a lot less. There's actually a lower risk of injury. So it's we have a lot of very smart sports science people, and when I see a player play a Europa League game, that hasn't been taken lightly. They've considered a lot of things, and they're getting minutes because either they need the minutes or we think the minutes are worth it. And I just completely trust the club with this stuff.
Well, to Stevie's point that's on the screen, right? Stevie's saying that, he's basically saying he hopes that Eddie's using the Europa League to mentally prepare himself for a Prem start, given that Jesus is, was one yellow away from a suspension. So do you see that coming into account in some ways? Do you think that actually, Thursday may be a case where we play Eddie and also look to really see him make an impact to the point where maybe we start bringing him in for Premier League games coming up. Maybe we play him for Southampton. Maybe we play him at Nottingham Forest at home or whatever, just to maybe make sure that, well, one, you've still got that healthy competition for Jesus, but two, just to make sure that Jesus doesn't pick up an untimely suspension for someone like a Chelsea.
Possibly. I think if it's a one game before Chelsea, you might miss that and play the Europa League game before, so we can just guarantee he's around for that final game, the Chelsea game. I do wonder how Eddie's feeling at the moment, because obviously he was the guy for a period last season where he got some good goals and did well for us. But, and then he signed that contract, and we're never going to know why he signed the contract and what the terms were and what he was promised and what he wasn't promised. But he's number 2 striker, right? And actually, I don't think if you're Eddie, you can complain about not getting in ahead of Jesus and anyone else. But I think actually for him, he's 22, 23. And he's basically our number 2 striker. He's going to play every Europa League game, probably every FA Cup game, probably every League Cup game. That's not a bad deal for him.
It's not, is it? It's not.
And I still think we need another striker at some point. But I'm very confident that Eddie can do well in the Europa League. And I think we'll learn a lot. We're learning a lot about this team and these players in the Europa League, because it's a nice to have. I think it benefits us more than it costs us at the moment.
I agree with you. And, it will be a tough one on Thursday, though. Mufasa pointing out here in the comments, PSV beat Zurich 5-0 and won their game today 6-1. So it's not going to be easy, but it's going to be a good test. So it'll be a good test for even those, those fringe players who are trying to, because it's one thing when you are trying to break into the team and you're playing against teams which aren't quite Premier League quality teams, then, maybe the management also says, yeah, he played well, but actually it's a bit different from going to Leeds away, isn't it? And, maybe a performance against PSV can like really make the case for some of them. Before we go on to the Southampton game, I just want to shout out this comment. So Digi Scott, I hope I'm pronouncing your first name correctly. I'm sorry if I'm not. But Digi says, aloha from China. I don't often catch the YouTube live. 7-hour time difference. 8 once your clocks go back. Listen to the audio pod though. I mean, honestly, it might be my favorite comment of all 81 episodes, although, we only actually activated comments for the last 3 episodes. But ignore that. Because, we are not a huge viral podcast. We are not sensationalist. It doesn't necessarily lend itself to being that great. We're not expert pundits. We don't have fancy graphics or anything like that. We literally just are a bunch of random dudes who happen to go to games and just want to share our perspective as fans who go to games. So the fact that there could be someone somewhere in the world, even if it is one person, who bothers to choose us as a podcast that they would listen to, is pretty much the main driver why I would record this pod on a weekly basis. It's literally like the main reason why I would do it. And so that comment means a huge amount to me. So I really appreciate that. Aaron, and I'm sure I speak for you as well, but
yeah. Thank you. And also just a big shout out to all the audio listeners, the silent majority. If you're listening, do get in touch. Find a way to get in touch with us: Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, whatever, and just let us know you're out there, because it means a lot. So thank you all for listening from wherever in the world you are.
Yeah, totally, absolutely. No, I really love that comment. Thank you, Digi, again, and thank you, yes, everyone, as Aaron says. So anyway, segueing back, the reason why I wanted to say that now, Digi, is because I saw your time difference point, and I thought, just in case it goes to sleep, let me just say this now. But cool. Listen, then Southampton, very quickly, Southampton. So I'm really finding it hard to figure out Southampton. I'm really figuring it hard to, because at the beginning of the season, well, let's say it was particularly after the transfer window closed, and it looked like they'd done a lot of really interesting, smart, funky business. Those kinds of players that, only kind of the most, what can I say, like well-trained scout. Well-trained, probably not the phrase I'm looking for, but essentially they're finding loads of these players that you imagine someone who is really filtering through and doing their really intensive due diligence on the various global leagues that many top scouts probably don't even look at. It really felt like that's what's happening at Southampton. They're picking out loads of gems, and they look like they're playing really good football under Ralph. But I can't quite figure out still if they're a good team or not. Like every now and again, they're pulling off a decent result, but every now and again, they're just, fizzling, should I say?
Yeah, I don't really get them. I know I think they're the youngest team in the league, right? We're second. They're probably the youngest in terms of squad.
Those
age.
are fighting words. Fighting words. Are you sure about that? I mean,
I'm pretty sure they are. They are regularly put out a very young average 11, starting 11 age. But we're obviously very close. But they've bought all these players, but they've got Ralph, and I think I saw some stats. If you compare his first half of his career, I don't know how many games it's been now, like 30 or 40 games, to his second 40, 50 games, it is completely dropped off a cliff, Southampton. In the back end of last season, the start of this season, they just haven't looked like they've been able to get going. And I know they got a point at West Ham today, but I remember I watched them against Villa, and I think Villa are awful, but actually they lost to Villa. And maybe it is a project. Maybe they're very very early on in this project youth, and I don't really know if this is a Ralph idea or if this is an idea that's being put on him from somewhere else, but something isn't working for them. But I don't know. I just feel like even when Southampton are playing really badly, they play us and then they just turn up and win. So we've got to be careful. We obviously are the better team. We will do very well, hopefully, against them. But they, like any away game in this league, you're not 100%, and you can very, very easily lose.
Yeah, because we don't have the disadvantage of playing away in Europe midweek. So at least that'll probably help in terms of preparation, you would imagine, and rest for the players. But I think one of the things that concerns me slightly is just is motivational fatigue for this team a little bit. I think one of the best things that we've been doing this season is playing every game like a cup final. I feel like even some of the Europa League games, I sort of get that feeling because I just feel that there's this momentum, and it's almost like a culture that's in the dressing room of just being kind of really, really, really up for every game that we play. I think that can be quite tiring though. And I think that in the Premier League, 2 away games on the bounce is it's tough. I think it's tough because it's a tough league. And so going away to Leeds, and I think, you know, I think the performance probably wasn't as fluent as we've seen before, as we've just discussed, right? That to go back and go away to another Premier League ground against another team who, you know, for Southampton's flaws, like you've just discussed, kind of thing, they're definitely not technically a bad side. And so if they do turn it on, and history does mean a lot to teams and players. I sometimes really, I sometimes really wonder why that's such a big deal in terms of, you know, when teams play other teams that they've historically had good results against, it seems to really help them. And I've often wondered why that's such a big deal. But it seems to be a big deal. It seems to be a thing in the dressing room. They will talk and say, "We always beat these guys. We've got a great record against these guys, etc." So, you know, I think last season they knocked us out of the FA Cup really early. I think, you know, it was like a really early round that they knocked us out of the FA Cup. So they might have.
I think we played them twice.
We did. I think we won the second time, right?
Yeah.
I think we won the Premier League game.
Yeah.
But we lost that. Yeah. So, you know, so just from everything that we've said, do you still see Arsenal winning against Southampton, or do you? So actually, let's do PSV Southampton consecutively. What are our two results going to be?
I'm going to be boring. I think we'll win them both. I think maybe PSV we might. I think we're more likely to drop points against PSV than we will against Southampton, just because we might not be up for it, because there is a second chance for PSV. I know there's a second chance for the league. I mean, we'll drop points eventually, but I think we have this really unique, rare opportunity in the history of this club to keep this great start going in the league. And actually I think we will. And I think that naturally, psychologically, will be the priority. But no, I think if you asked me to commit, and if I was going to bet, I'd probably bet on us winning both. The interesting thing you said, Raj, is about this cup final thing and playing like a cup final and this motivational fatigue. I think that's a really good point, because, you know, it's, despite the saying, you can't play every game in the league in a season like a cup final, because throughout the season, you need those ups and downs where there are some games where you just want to coast and see out the final 30 minutes of a game because you've won it. We can't play every game like we did today, where we're desperately hanging on, because we will lose a lot of games if we play like that. So we need to be able to win games early on and wrap them up, and we've sort of started doing that to a certain extent, especially in the first couple of games of the season. But what would be really cool is if we could turn up away from home and exert ourselves and kind of just, you know, show the dominance that we know we have. And if we can do that and actually win comfortably, then we can start to rotate a bit more. We can take Jesus off because we're 2 or 3 goals up and we have 15 minutes left, and we can give Eddie some more minutes. We can give Vieira some more minutes. And that will allow them to build on this European momentum.
I agree with that. And I actually agree with your overall predictions. I think that we'll draw against PSV. I think PSV are quite good, actually. I don't know too much about them. I'm just going by results and players kind of thing. I think that arguably, if you take the top 5 teams in the Europa League, I'd argue that PSV are one of those top 5 teams. So I think Arsenal are one of those top 5 teams. I think PSV, I think it's just unfortunate for us that we've got them in our group. And they've got a couple of good players. They've got Gakpo, who is, like, you know, everyone wants him seemingly. He's just like this top talent. And they are the second in Eredivisie. They've won 8 and lost 2. So yeah, decent. But I think against Southampton, ironically, saying this as an Arsenal fan, given what we went through last season, I think ironically that Southampton's youth will be their issue against us. A little bit of that inexperience. Like, I think that we are genuinely a good side now, as well as being young. We are genuinely a good side, and I think that we are a very disciplined side in terms of roles and kind of focus and just like habits, if you like. And I feel like they don't have that yet. Their youthful side don't have that yet, and I think that might end up being the difference, to be honest. But, you know, mate, like, if we, because what's really nice is, you know, we're paying PSV in midweek. The rest of the league plays midweek. The rest of the Premier League plays midweek, right? Well, more or less, I think pretty much everyone else
well,
does.
except City.
Except City.
Yeah.
Sorry, right? Except City. So, regardless of what happens midweek, Arsenal will still be top of the Premier League, which is just
we'll have a game in hand.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of teams I think below us have only played 9.
Because of the Queen's funeral stuff. Yeah,
exactly. So it will it will end up evening itself out. But out of the games that are going on midweek, there are some interesting ones, right? That from an Arsenal fan's perspective to keep an eye on, right? So Liverpool have got West Ham, and obviously Liverpool, beat City today, and great result for them. But that's not an easy game. I wouldn't say Liverpool at home and West Ham's easy. I personally think Liverpool will win, but Chelsea going away at Brentford is interesting, and Man United Spurs, right? So someone's dropping points in Man United Spurs. Yeah. It's either both of them or it's one of them. So it's still going to be a really interesting week for us, isn't it?
It is. It's one of those where, I do wonder. Like, would we have rather played City on Wednesday or PSV? I mean, would you rather play City now or City, I assume, in January, February time when that game is going to be rearranged? And part of me is that actually when we're playing well, when we're on top, you kind of do want to play City now, because who knows what we're going to be like in February. After the World Cup, it's basically going to be a new season. But it would have been nice. It would have been a fun game to go to, like if we had Wednesday night, evening game against Man City, first v second. But when you take out that game, our run-in, is now I think Southampton, Forest, Chelsea, Wolves, something like that, which is considering we've just played Spurs, we've just played Liverpool, actually taking this City game out and replacing it with still a pretty tough game in PSV, but albeit a Europa League game, probably does us a bit of a favor, I think. And actually, if we can put that City game in a slightly less intense period of the season, maybe City might be distracted with the Champions League in February, March. Who knows? Like, it's impossible to predict, but I think overall it's probably a good thing.
I agree with you. Okay. Well, listen, it's been another great week to be an Arsenal fan, to be honest. It's just been another great week. And let's hope it carries on that way. I mean, the one thing's for sure is that we will still be top of the league at the very least until the end of the week. But the other really interesting thing, I think, is if you look through the fixtures, like you've said, some of our fixtures are fairly reasonable, like coming up in future weeks. And actually, in those weeks, some of our rivals have got some pretty tricky games. So I'm really intrigued to see how the league table looks in 2-3 weeks' time. I'm really intrigued, because if we do win our next 3 games, Southampton away, Nottingham Forest at home, and Wolves away, right? Those are our 3 games, I think.
We've got Chelsea away in between, just before Wolves.
Chelsea in between. Yeah. Okay, that's a tough fixture. Let's say if we win 3 out of those 4 games, I'd be really intrigued to see what the table looks like. Really intrigued. So anyway, we will leave it there, shall we? It's been a really great chat, Aaron, and it was a nice experience just learning about the game today, having not watched it. I may try and catch some highlights now anyway. But hey, Arsenal keep winning, and we love to keep talking about it. So listen, everyone, thank you very much for joining us, Aaron, and thank you. Enjoy whatever you guys are doing for the week. I hope you have fun weeks, and please like, share, subscribe the pod. We really, really appreciate everything.
Indeed. Thank you so much, everyone.
Cool. Thanks, guys. All right.
Bye. Bye.